Donovan Chase reclined in his leather armchair, a fortress of mahogany and marble surrounding him as he sipped his whiskey. It was his nightly ritual, this quiet hour of solitude in his private lounge, a moment to disconnect from the relentless chaos of his world. Outside the tall windows, his vast estate sprawled in darkness, surrounded by high walls and an impenetrable security system. He had every reason to feel safe here. And yet, tonight, he didn't. The recent threats had started as minor annoyances. A scrawled letter here, a strange phone call there. But then the notes had become more personal, targeting details only someone close would know. A small scar on his left wrist, a picture he kept in his desk drawer of a woman from his past. The letters now hinted at things he'd thought were buried in his past, a reminder that someone knew his secrets and was waiting for the right moment to make him pay. As he drained the last of his whiskey, Donovan glanced up and met the eyes of Alex Hayes, his newly hired bodyguard. Alex was standing a few feet away, his posture tense, shoulders squared. He was everything Donovan wanted in a protector. Discreet, disciplined, built like a wall of muscle, and with a military background that promised both skill and loyalty. But tonight, there was something different in Alex's gaze, something Donovan couldn't quite place. It was as though Alex was watching him with a hint of recognition, a sense of familiarity. Caught off guard, Donovan held his gaze a moment too long. Alex's expression didn't waver. If anything, it seemed to deepen. Donovan felt a slight, unfamiliar chill in his spine. The silence stretched, an electric current humming between them, and for the first time, he questioned his decision to bring Alex into his world so quickly. "Can I get you anything else tonight, Mr. Chase?" Alex's voice broke the tension, firm yet soft-spoken. Donovan shook his head, forcing a chuckle. No, that'll be all, Alex. I just thought I saw something." "Understood," Alex replied, though his words were careful, measured. He shifted, almost blending back into the shadows of the room. The moment passed, but a nagging thought lingered in Donovan's mind. There had been something unusual in Alex's eyes, an intensity that didn't belong to a mere employee. He shook off the feeling, convincing himself that the stress of the threats had made him paranoid. The letters had been relentless, after all, and the fear of an unseen enemy was slowly eating at him. But even in his attempts to rationalize, he couldn't shake the suspicion creeping in. The first note had been oddly vague. "You know what you did." No signature, no indication of who it was from. Donovan had laughed it off, tossing it in the trash. But the notes had continued, growing more insistent and, to his horror, more personal. The second note had detailed a long-abandoned house he used to visit, a place that no one in his current life knew about. Then, the third note, a photograph of him as a young man, standing next to a woman he had loved and lost under tragic circumstances. He hadn't even thought about her in years, yet here she was, staring back at him in an old photograph he thought had been buried with the rest of his past. Feeling uneasy, Donovan rose from his chair, dismissing Alex for the night with a wave of his hand. Alex nodded and left silently, but as Donovan turned toward his office, he couldn't resist a backward glance. He caught Alex watching him again, his eyes narrowed, brows furrowed, as if he were studying Donovan for something more than just security. The following morning, Donovan tried to convince himself it had been nothing more than a tense exchange, amplified by his nerves. Yet, a few hours into his morning routine, he noticed a new envelope slipped under his office door. This note was more direct. "The past has a way of catching up with you, Donovan, and you can't buy your way out of this one." Panic twisted in his gut as he read and reread the words. He had almost forgotten that version of himself, the impulsive, reckless Donovan who had taken one too many risks, who had blurred the line between charm and manipulation to get what he wanted. But this note's threatening tone suggested someone else had a sharper memory, someone who didn't intend to let him leave his past behind so easily. Determined to take control of the situation, he immediately called Alex to his office. Alex entered, his face impassive, his stance alert as he waited for instructions. Donovan slid the note across the desk. "This came today. I don't know who could be sending these or how they're getting so close." Alex picked up the note, his eyes scanning it without a hint of emotion. He set it down and looked up, face unreadable. "Do you have any enemies, Mr. Chase?" Alex's tone was neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, something Donovan couldn't place. Donovan's laugh was hollow. "Enemies? Alex, I have an entire corporation. My life is full of people who might wish me harm. Anyone in particular?" The question seemed loaded, as if Alex already knew the answer. But Donovan brushed it off, avoiding the temptation to let Alex see too deeply into his personal life. He had hired Alex to protect him, not pry into his past. "Nothing specific," Donovan lied. "Just old rivals. Bitter clients, maybe?" Alex nodded, though Donovan sensed he didn't entirely believe him. The note still sat between them, a small piece of paper heavy with implications neither of them dared address directly. And as Donovan looked up at Alex, he realized he still didn't know much about the man who was charged with protecting his life. Why had he chosen this line of work? What made him so intensely focused and secretive? "I want you to double the security measures," Donovan finally said. "Nobody gets in or out without your approval. I don't care if it's my closest business associates." "Understood," Alex replied, a brief flicker of something. Was it relief? Crossing his face. "You'll be safe under my watch, Mr. Chase. I'll make sure of it." The words were meant to reassure him, but Donovan could still feel Alex's eyes lingering, watching him closely, as if studying his every reaction. The look in Alex's eyes left Donovan with more questions than answers, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his bodyguard knew far more about him than he let on. It was as though, with each note, Alex was silently assessing him, searching for signs of guilt or remorse. And it left Donovan wondering just how much of his past had really been left behind, and how much of it Alex might already know. Donovan hadn't slept much after the latest note. His thoughts spun in a chaotic loop as he tried to unravel who might want him shaken like this, and why. When he finally closed his eyes, every creak of his mansion seemed magnified, every whisper of wind against the windows carrying with it a new threat. Morning came with a gray light that seemed to seep into his bones. Donovan moved through his daily routine as if on autopilot, his mind barely registering the mundane tasks he performed out of habit. By the time he made his way downstairs, his assistant, Rachel, was waiting with his schedule, her sharp, efficient manner doing little to ease his nerves. "Good morning, Mr. Chase," she greeted him as usual, her voice brisk. "Your meeting with the board has been moved to 2 p.m., and Mr. Hayes wanted me to inform you that he's implemented the new security measures. He'll meet you in the study when you're ready." Donovan nodded, glancing at her but saying nothing. Rachel had worked for him for years, long enough to read his moods like a well-thumbed book. And today, her brow creased slightly as she observed him, concern softening her usually businesslike gaze. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, hesitating, as if expecting him to brush her off. "Just tired, Rachel," he replied, managing a weak smile. "Long night." She didn't press him, and he was grateful. He continued to the study, feeling that uncomfortable sense of someone watching his every move. Alex was already there, standing by the window, back straight, his figure casting a tall shadow across the room. "Mr. Chase," Alex greeted him, his tone flat as usual. "I wanted to go over a few things." Donovan closed the study door behind him. "You're here early," he noted, unable to keep an edge out of his voice. Alex had kept to his quarters the previous night. Yet Donovan still sensed an invisible presence lingering in the shadows, as if Alex was always near, always watching. "I take threats against my employer seriously," Alex said, his eyes unreadable as he met Donovan's gaze. "Especially when they're as direct as this one." Donovan motioned to the couch, not because he expected Alex to sit, but to take his own seat, feeling slightly more grounded in the plush leather. "Have you made any progress in tracing the notes?" Alex shook his head, his jaw tight. "No fingerprints, no traceable stamps or paper. It's as if they were meant to bypass every safeguard." "Impressive, really," Donovan muttered, though there was nothing amusing about it. If someone was capable of slipping into his guarded life with such ease, they were more dangerous than he initially thought. Alex's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Chase, I understand you don't want to discuss personal matters, but whoever is doing this knows things only someone close to you would. That narrows it down considerably." Are you sure there's nothing specific you can tell me? Donovan's gaze flicked to the window, avoiding Alex's piercing eyes. He thought of his past, the person he'd tried so hard to forget, the version of himself he hoped was long gone. He considered Alex's question but wasn't ready to reveal the ghosts lurking in his history, not even to his bodyguard. I don't have any idea who'd go to these lengths, Alex, he said carefully. My only rivals these days are business competitors. It doesn't add up. Alex's silence spoke volumes. His skepticism was obvious, and it irritated Donovan in a way he couldn't quite explain. Who was Alex to question him? Yes, he was his protector, but Donovan sensed he wanted something more. He almost asked if Alex had his own theories, but stopped himself, wary of giving him an opening into matters he'd kept hidden for so long. The day passed in a fog of meetings and emails, but Donovan's mind kept drifting back to the envelope's menacing words. By afternoon, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "Your secrets are safe only for as long as I want them to be." An immediate chill swept over him, and his chest tightened. The intruder was escalating, somehow managing to bypass his upgraded security measures with alarming ease. After his meeting, he found Alex waiting in his office, his stance stiff and watchful. Donovan wasted no time, thrusting his phone into Alex's hand. "They texted me," he said, his voice harsher than intended. Alex read the message, his mouth setting into a grim line. "That's a level of access I didn't anticipate. Whoever this is, they're able to bypass normal security channels. I'll need to investigate all personnel connected to your phone line. No detail is too small." "Then do it," Donovan snapped, an edge of desperation in his tone. "Find out who's behind this, Alex. I can't keep second-guessing everyone around me." Alex's expression didn't change, but his eyes held something like sympathy. "Understood. I'll need full access to your communication records, recent contacts, and any private files you think might be relevant." Donovan hesitated, feeling his privacy slipping away with each passing second. He lived a life surrounded by people, yet always in control, holding everyone at arm's length. Now, his carefully guarded privacy was being breached not only by an unknown threat, but also by his own bodyguard. He nodded tightly, gesturing for Alex to proceed. The next few hours were spent in a tense silence as Alex pored over Donovan's files, emails, and call records. Donovan tried to keep himself busy, but the sound of Alex flipping through his most private documents made him feel exposed in a way he hadn't anticipated. His reputation, his life's work, and the secrets he'd buried all lay bare in front of this man who had somehow managed to get closer to him than anyone else had in years. Finally, Alex straightened, closing the last of the files. "Nothing suspicious so far," he reported. "But there's something odd in the way these messages are delivered. Whoever's behind this seems to know not just about your past, but also your present. They have access to places I haven't seen anyone reach before." Donovan's hands clenched the edge of his desk. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Alex hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully, "I mean this is beyond a typical vendetta. The messages seem designed not just to threaten, but to haunt you. Whoever's doing this knows exactly how to unnerve you." The implication settled heavily in the air. Donovan felt as though he was being hunted, each message a sniper's shot aiming for his most vulnerable memories. He recalled the woman he'd once loved and lost, the choices he'd made that had seemed so reasonable at the time, and the cost he'd paid for the empire he now possessed. He couldn't shake the image of her face, nor the haunting suspicion that her memory was at the heart of this torment. "What are you getting at?" Donovan asked quietly, though he feared the answer. Alex's gaze was steady, unreadable. "I'm saying this isn't random, Mr. Chase. This is a message from someone who was deeply affected by your actions, someone who wants you to feel the weight of your own decisions. They know you in ways I'm not sure you'd like to admit." The words struck Donovan like a physical blow. His past, the carefully compartmentalized life he'd built over years of meticulous control, was beginning to unravel. And he had no one to blame but himself. He clenched his jaw, his mind a whirlwind of questions he couldn't answer, images he couldn't bear to relive. He dismissed Alex with a terse nod, barely registering the man's exit as he sank into his chair, struggling to regain control over his thoughts. But as he stared at the empty doorway, he knew one thing with certainty. Whoever was behind this wasn't finished with him yet. And as much as he hated to admit it, he suspected Alex was right. This was personal, and whoever was orchestrating these threats wouldn't stop until Donovan faced the ghosts he had long left buried. As he looked around his empty study, he had to wonder how long before Alex's watchful eyes would be the last thing he saw. That night, Donovan lay in his dark bedroom, his mind circling the accusations embedded in the messages. He couldn't ignore them any longer. The threats were too pointed, too personal. His pulse quickened as he relived the last words in that recent text. "Your secrets are safe only for as long as I want them to be." It had been over 20 years since he'd spoken to anyone about the night his life changed forever. The woman in that old photo, the one sent to him just days ago, was the woman who had once held his heart, Isabel. She was the one whose memory he tried to leave behind when he set out to become the powerful Donovan Chase the world knew today. He'd met Isabel when he was just a rising name in business, still green, eager, and more naive than he would ever admit. She had been his sanctuary from the corporate world, someone who saw the man beneath his ambitions. But his love for her had come at a high cost. The Chase family, his domineering father in particular, had insisted on his commitment to the family business, and he'd been forced to choose between his dreams with Isabel and the fortune promised by the family's multimillion-dollar empire. One fateful night, he'd made that choice. He'd broken things off with Isabel, convincing himself he could live with the consequences. But she hadn't taken it well. Heartbroken and angry, Isabel had tried to warn him that there were prices to pay for betraying love. She had vanished from his life that night, and rumors spread of an accident, of her life ending abruptly. Donovan never learned the details. He'd been too afraid to look, choosing instead to forge ahead, burying his regret and guilt. Now, it seemed that choice had come back to haunt him. Was Isabel's death truly an accident? Had someone close to her decided to avenge her? These messages were starting to feel like a reckoning, as though someone was watching him, waiting for him to confront the pieces of himself he'd left behind. As dawn approached, Donovan felt himself slipping into a restless sleep, only to be jolted awake by a loud, jarring sound. His phone buzzed with a new message. Squinting at the screen in the dim light, he read, "You destroyed her. Now it's time to destroy you." A cold sweat covered his forehead, and his hands shook. He pressed the call button for Alex without hesitation, something he would have refused to do just a few days earlier. Alex answered on the second ring, his voice steady, calm. "Mr. Chase? I need you in my study now," Donovan said, the words clipped, betraying his mounting fear. Within minutes, Alex was at his door, fully dressed despite the early hour. His presence was as composed as ever, but Donovan noticed the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He could read the tension on Donovan's face. Donovan handed him the phone, pointing at the message without saying a word. Alex read it, his jaw tightening. When he looked back at Donovan, there was no trace of surprise. Instead, he seemed almost unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting something like this all along. "Is there something you haven't told me?" Alex asked quietly, his voice probing but steady. Donovan hesitated, grappling with the sudden vulnerability he felt in front of his own bodyguard. Alex's eyes held that same searching quality he'd noticed before, as if he were looking for a crack in Donovan's armor. But Donovan could feel the weight of his own mistakes, the secrets threatening to drown him. "There was someone," Donovan finally admitted, his voice hoarse. "A long time ago, before all of this. I made choices that hurt her, but I moved on. Or I thought I did." Alex's gaze didn't waver. "And you think she or someone connected to her is sending these messages now?" "She's gone," Donovan replied, a mixture of regret and uncertainty in his voice. "Or at least that's what I believed. But these messages, they bring her back in ways I didn't expect." Alex's expression softened for a fleeting moment. "We need to go over everyone in your life who might know about her. Anyone who could have been close to her. Whoever is behind this knows details too specific for it to be random." Donovan sank into his chair, exhausted but unwilling to let Alex see just how deep his guilt ran. Instead, He closed his eyes, trying to remember any details that might help. Isabel had been a bright light in his world, and her departure had left him scarred, but he'd assumed no one else had known just how much she had meant to him. Had he been wrong? Suddenly, he remembered someone. Isabel's younger brother, Liam. He had only met him once or twice, a rebellious, sharp-eyed teenager who had idolized his sister and distrusted Donovan's every move. They had never spoken directly, but Donovan remembered his resentment clearly, the simmering anger in the boy's eyes whenever he visited Isabel. Liam had blamed him for Isabel's heartbreak. In retrospect, Donovan couldn't blame him. "Her brother," Donovan murmured, his eyes opening as he met Alex's gaze. "Liam. I barely knew him, but he was there in the background, watching every time I was with Isabel. Do you know what happened to him?" Alex asked, taking out a notepad. "No, I never kept track of him after Isabel and I parted ways." Donovan's voice was tight with discomfort. "I have no idea where he is or what he's doing now." Alex nodded, scribbling a quick note. "I'll dig into his background. If he's behind this, he'll have left a trail." Donovan watched Alex write with an unsettling mixture of trust and suspicion. Alex was more than competent, yet there was something too knowing about him, too aware of the nuances of Donovan's past. Had he somehow known about Isabel all along? "Thank you, Alex," he said finally, though the words felt as hollow as his confidence. Alex's gaze met his, a faint trace of something unreadable flickering across his features. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, Mr. Chase. But I need you to be honest with me about anything that could help." For a moment, Donovan felt a twinge of something like vulnerability under Alex's steady gaze. The man wasn't just his bodyguard. He was turning into a kind of confessor, the only person who seemed to know Donovan's secrets. But even as he acknowledged that connection, he couldn't shake the worry that Alex's loyalty came with its own complexities. That evening, Donovan returned to his empty mansion, every creak and shadow seeming to pulse with accusation. He drifted to the room where he kept the few mementos of his past, a chest in the corner of the study containing letters, photos, and a small jewelry box Isabel had once given him. For years, he'd kept this collection hidden, but tonight he felt compelled to confront it. Opening the lid, he found a note he had never remembered seeing before. It read, "Some things don't die so easily." His hands trembled as he held the note, realizing that someone must have been inside his study recently. Whoever had placed the note had done so not just to threaten him, but to remind him of the life he'd tried to bury. A knock on the study door startled him, and he quickly stashed the note back in the chest. It was Alex, his face bearing the same inscrutable look. "We need to talk," Alex said. "What is it?" Donovan asked, trying to mask his unease. "I looked into Isabel's family. Her brother, Liam. He dropped off the radar a few years after Isabel's death. But there are reports of him resurfacing recently, apparently linked to a group known for unconventional methods of getting revenge. They're not directly violent, but they're experts in psychological warfare." Donovan's pulse quickened, fear mingling with anger. "So he's the one sending these messages?" Alex shook his head. "I can't say for certain yet, but I'd bet he's either behind it or helping someone else who is." The thought of Liam, the bitter young man he'd barely known, carefully orchestrating his downfall sent a chill through Donovan. He met Alex's gaze, feeling an unspoken challenge between them. Here was the one man who stood between him and the shadows creeping in on him from all sides, the man who seemed to know every crack in Donovan's armor. "Whoever it is," Alex continued, his tone unwavering, "they're not stopping until you face what you did." Donovan could only nod, realizing he was finally out of moves. His past had caught up to him, and his only hope of escape now lay in Alex's hands. As the clock struck midnight, Donovan understood that the game was just beginning, and that his own life, everything he'd worked to build, was in the hands of a man who knew more about his past than he was willing to admit. Over the next few days, Donovan's mansion felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. Every room, every shadow, seemed to echo with memories he tried to escape. He was no longer able to ignore the sense that his past was closing in, and with it, a darker presence growing ever closer. He'd barely spoken to anyone since Alex's revelation about Liam. Knowing Isabel's brother might be the architect of this torment made Donovan feel both relieved and unnerved. Relieved, because the enemy finally had a face. Unnerved, because Liam had every reason to hate him, and that vendetta had clearly festered for decades, twisted into something relentless and dangerous. One afternoon, Donovan finally left his study and decided to walk the grounds in an attempt to clear his mind. But even the estate's manicured gardens couldn't shake the gnawing dread. Every step felt heavy, as though each flower bed, each marble fountain, whispered that nothing he owned, nothing he built, could ever protect him from the choices he had made. He turned a corner, his eyes catching on something unexpected. Alex, standing near the edge of the property by the old stone wall. The sight struck him as odd. Alex was usually vigilant about staying close, yet here he was, seemingly lost in thought. Donovan observed him from a distance, noting Alex's tense posture, his gaze fixed on something outside the estate's boundary. His expression was dark, far from his usual disciplined demeanor. For a moment, Alex's face softened, and Donovan could have sworn he saw a trace of sorrow. As Donovan approached, Alex's expression shifted instantly, the impenetrable mask of professionalism sliding back into place. He turned, his stance once again solid and poised, as though he'd been expecting Donovan all along. "Taking a break?" Donovan asked, his voice calm, though the question was anything but casual. Alex's eyes flickered, and he gave a curt nod, just assessing the perimeter, making sure there are no weak spots. His tone was steady, but Donovan could sense an underlying tension in his voice, something restrained. "You seemed a bit focused," Donovan replied, attempting to probe, though he knew Alex well enough by now to realize he wouldn't crack so easily. Alex's gaze held Donovan's for a moment before he finally answered, his words careful. "The job requires focus, Mr. Chase, especially with a situation like this." He glanced away, and Donovan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more left unsaid. The tension between them had been building since the day Alex had arrived. Donovan couldn't shake his suspicions about the man's motives, yet he had to admit Alex was the most capable person he'd ever employed. Still, that unnerving feeling persisted, like Alex knew more than he was letting on. Later that evening, Donovan couldn't resist another look into Alex's background. As he sat in his study, he accessed his computer and dug deeper than before, calling in a favor with a contact who specialized in discreet investigations. He needed to know the details of Alex's past, any connections that might link him to Isabel or her family. It wasn't long before his contact replied, and what Donovan discovered left him reeling. Alex had a spotless career in the military, top security clearance, a flawless record. But there was something off. Right before joining Donovan's service, Alex had worked under a private contract for a high-profile security agency in the very region where Isabel's family had once lived. And even more unsettling, he'd been assigned to a task force investigating cold cases involving organized retaliation against wealthy figures. Figures like Donovan himself. The pieces fell together too perfectly. It was as if Alex had been circling Donovan's life for years, only waiting for the right moment to insert himself as his protector. But was Alex working for Liam? Or was he involved in a way Donovan hadn't even begun to understand? The more Donovan thought about it, the more his suspicions grew. He felt an icy fear settling in his gut, realizing that Alex might not be there just to protect him, but to watch him, to study him. Perhaps Alex was playing a dangerous game, one where he straddled the line between ally and adversary. Determined to confront him, Donovan waited until late that night when he knew Alex would be making his rounds. He found him in the foyer, meticulously checking the locks on the windows, his focus as intense as always. Alex turned the moment Donovan entered, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Chase, is everything all right?" "Actually, no," Donovan replied, his tone sharper than he intended. "There's something I need to ask you, and I'd prefer an honest answer." Alex's face remained neutral. "I'm here to answer anything, sir. You know that." Donovan stepped closer, crossing his arms as he studied Alex's face for any sign of deception. "Why are you really here, Alex? I looked into your background, and I know about your work on cold cases connected to wealthy targets. It seems awfully convenient that you ended up in my employ." For a brief moment, Alex's composure faltered, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he regained control. With all due respect, Mr. Chase, my background is no secret. Yes, I've worked on cases that involved high-profile individuals, but that experience is what qualifies me to protect you now. Donovan narrowed his eyes, not satisfied with the answer. So, it's a coincidence that your work brought you into contact with people tied to my past? With people like Isabel? Alex held his gaze steadily, his expression softening just slightly. No, Mr. Chase. It's not a coincidence. He took a deep breath, his tone quieter now, almost confessional. But I'm here to protect you, not to harm you. If I'd wanted to hurt you, you wouldn't be standing here right now. The admission sent a shiver through Donovan, his heart pounding. Then why not tell me from the start? Why let me think you were just here for a paycheck? Because I needed you to trust me, Alex replied simply. Trust that I could handle whatever threats came your way. You may not want to hear this, but you're not the only one haunted by the past. Donovan's mind raced as he processed Alex's words. So it was true. Alex had come into his life not just to protect him, but because he had some stake in Donovan's past, in Isabel's memory. But why? And more importantly, how much did he know? What exactly do you know about Isabel? Donovan demanded, feeling his patience fray. Alex's jaw tightened. Enough to know that she was wronged, and that you were involved. But I also know that whatever happened then can't change what's happening now. Someone else wants you to pay, Mr. Chase, and they're not as interested in the truth as I am. Donovan fell silent, the weight of Alex's words settling over him. So Alex was fully aware of Isabel, aware of his betrayal, and yet he was still here, protecting him. Donovan couldn't decide if it was loyalty or something darker. I don't need you to understand everything, Alex continued, his voice almost gentle. But I need you to know this. Whoever's behind these messages, these threats, they're not stopping at scaring you. They're moving in closer, tightening their grip. They want you broken. Donovan felt a surge of frustration and anger, his mind flashing with the memory of that last message. The past doesn't forget, and neither should you. He clenched his fists, feeling trapped. Alex might be his ally, but he was also a reminder of Isabel, of everything he tried to bury. What are you going to do? Donovan finally asked, struggling to suppress the tremor in his voice. Alex's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Donovan saw a glint of fury there, a controlled, focused rage. I'm going to find out who's behind this and put a stop to it. But I need you to cooperate, to trust me. If you can do that, we stand a chance of ending this. Donovan exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of Alex's words. And if I don't trust you? Then they'll have already won, Alex replied, his tone matter of fact. Because that's exactly what they want. For you to doubt everyone around you, to isolate yourself until there's no one left to protect you. Donovan looked away, his mind reeling with doubt and fear. Every instinct told him to keep Alex at arm's length, but he knew that was impossible now. Alex had crossed a line, revealing not just his knowledge of Isabel, but his personal investment in her memory. Donovan could no longer pretend Alex was merely his employee. This man, his bodyguard, held the key to the past Donovan had buried, and without him, he might not survive the threats pressing in on him from all sides. Fine, Donovan said, his voice low. I'll trust you for now. But if I find out you're hiding anything else, anything that could endanger me, that trust disappears. Understood? Alex nodded, his expression unreadable. Understood, Mr. Chase. As Alex turned to leave, Donovan felt a cold, uneasy calm settle over him. His fate now rested in the hands of a man who seemed to know his every weakness, every hidden corner of his past. And as much as Donovan hated it, he knew he had no other choice but to rely on Alex, because whoever was hunting him wasn't going to stop until he was destroyed. The days following Donovan's confrontation with Alex felt like navigating a minefield. He'd reluctantly placed his trust in Alex, but every interaction between them was laced with unspoken tension. Donovan couldn't shake the feeling that he was sharing his home with both his protector and a witness to his darkest secrets, a man who knew too much and perhaps forgave too little. Late one evening, Donovan found himself in his study, contemplating the details Alex had shared about Liam and the potential connections to the relentless threats. Just as he was about to turn in for the night, his phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the silence. He glanced at the screen, expecting another terse message from his assistant, Rachel, or an update from Alex. But instead, the notification was a video message from an unknown number. Heart pounding, he clicked on it, and the screen went black before the camera panned up to reveal the face of a young man. His expression was cold, his features strikingly similar to someone Donovan hadn't seen in years. Isabel. The resemblance was undeniable. This had to be Liam. The young man's eyes bored into the camera, his voice a low whisper. Donovan Chase, you don't know me, but you know what you did. You stole her dreams, her future, and for that, you'll pay. There was a sharpness to his voice, a pain simmering beneath the surface. He paused, then leaned closer to the camera, his voice softening to a chilling murmur. You may think you can hide behind your walls and your bodyguard, but I'm coming for you. And I'll make sure you remember everything you buried. The screen went black. Donovan sat in stunned silence, his mind whirling as he replayed the message in his head. Liam's face haunted him. Those eyes, so much like Isabel's, seemed to sear through his defenses. He realized that no matter how much security he added, Liam's vendetta would not be stopped by mere walls or locks. Summoning Alex was instinctive. Within minutes, Alex entered the study, his expression already serious as he took in Donovan's pale face. Another message, Donovan said, voice hollow. He handed Alex the phone and watched as his bodyguard replayed the video, his jaw tightening with each second. When the video ended, Alex lowered the phone, his face darkened with a barely suppressed anger. Liam, Alex said, confirming Donovan's suspicions. He's finally shown his face. Donovan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He's getting closer, and I have a feeling he won't stop until... He didn't finish the thought, his mind too fraught with the implications. He won't stop until he feels justice has been served, Alex finished for him, his voice firm. But that doesn't mean we're helpless. We know more now than we did yesterday. That's something. Donovan let out a bitter laugh. What exactly do we know, Alex? That I destroyed his family, and now he wants to destroy me? It's not much of a strategy. We know his motivation, Alex replied calmly. And that's a key advantage. Revenge is personal. It makes people reckless. If Liam's goal is to see you suffer, he'll push the boundaries. We'll use that to stay one step ahead. Donovan stared at Alex, feeling the weight of his own guilt clawing at him. The man was right. His actions had torn Isabel from her family, leaving her brother with nothing but a memory and a vendetta. But as much as Donovan understood the root of Liam's anger, he wasn't ready to pay with his life. He was determined to fight back. Alex's eyes softened slightly, as though sensing Donovan's inner turmoil. Mr. Chase, I know this is deeply personal, but you need to stay focused. You have to trust that I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. Everything in your power, Donovan repeated, studying Alex closely. So, does that mean you'll be keeping more secrets, or are we done with that? A flicker of regret crossed Alex's face. No more secrets, he said, meeting Donovan's gaze steadily. From now on, you'll know everything I find, and I won't let him get to you. Donovan wasn't sure if it was Alex's words or his tone, but for the first time, he felt a sliver of genuine relief. He nodded, a reluctant sense of alliance forming between them. All right then, tell me your plan. The rest of the evening was spent strategizing, as Alex laid out a meticulous plan to secure the estate and monitor any digital activity that might provide clues to Liam's next move. They reinforced both physical and cyber defenses, and Alex arranged for a private investigator he trusted to look deeper into Liam's recent whereabouts. In the quiet hours of the night, as they went over the final details, Donovan realized he was putting his life in Alex's hands more than ever before. The dynamic between them had shifted, no longer simply employer and employee. Donovan sensed something deeper in Alex, a protectiveness that went beyond mere duty. And while it still unnerved him, it was also the only thing keeping his fears in check. As dawn approached, Donovan finally allowed himself to rest, falling into a restless sleep filled with memories of Isabel, the haunting look in Liam's eyes, and a growing sense of unease about the unfolding events. The next few days passed without incident. It seemed that their heightened defenses had warded off any further messages. But just as Donovan was beginning to hope for a reprieve, a new and unexpected threat appeared in the form of a knock at the mansion's door. Rachel, Donovan's assistant, informed him that a young woman was outside, asking for him by name. Rachel looked uneasy, clearly rattled by the woman's refusal to leave until Donovan came to speak with her. "What's her name?" Donovan asked, bracing himself for more unwelcome surprises. "She said her name is Claire," Rachel replied, frowning, "and she insists it's urgent." The name rang no bells, but given the circumstances, Donovan didn't dismiss her. He instructed Alex to join him as he went to the front entrance, feeling both curiosity and caution. As they reached the door, Donovan was struck by the young woman standing before him. She was slim, with dark hair pulled back, her eyes a piercing blue that seemed to see right through him. There was a rawness to her gaze, a pain that reminded him too much of Isabel. He could almost feel her anger in the way she held herself, defiant and resolute. "Donovan Chase?" she asked, her voice laced with tension. Donovan nodded, motioning for her to enter, but she shook her head, remaining firmly on the doorstep. She shot a wary glance at Alex before speaking. "I'm here because of my brother," she said simply, watching Donovan's reaction with a steady gaze. "Liam." Donovan's heart raced as he processed her words. So this was another piece of the puzzle. A sister he hadn't known about, someone else caught in the web of his past mistakes. "Why did you come here?" Donovan asked, his voice rough, yet steady. She hesitated, as though weighing whether to trust him. "Because I need you to know something. Liam isn't going to stop. He blames you for everything. For losing Isabel, for the life he thinks was taken from him." Alex's presence was solid and reassuring beside him, but Donovan could sense the tension radiating from him. "Why are you telling me this, Claire? I'd expect you to side with him." Her expression softened, a glimmer of vulnerability breaking through her hardened gaze. "Because I don't want him to ruin his life. I tried to tell him that revenge wouldn't bring her back, but he wouldn't listen. He thinks it's the only way." Donovan felt a pang of guilt, not just for the pain he'd caused but for the ripple effect it had created. This family had been shattered, and he was the catalyst. He looked at Claire, her expression a mixture of anger, fear, and something that resembled hope. "Claire," he began, his tone softer, "what do you want from me?" Her gaze sharpened. "I want you to stop him. I can't get through to him, but maybe you can. If you can show him that there's more to life than the mistakes of the past, maybe he'll let this go." Donovan felt a strange sense of responsibility, a notion that went beyond self-preservation. For years, he'd done his best to forget Isabel and the consequences of his choices. But now, confronted with the fallout, he realized he owed this family more than indifference. Alex stepped forward, his voice level. "Claire, if Liam is dangerous, we need to know how far he's willing to go." She turned to him, her voice laced with desperation. "I don't know. He's unpredictable, obsessed. He says he wants justice, but I'm afraid he'll do something he can't take back." As they watched her walk away, Donovan felt a hollow ache settle in his chest, a realization that no matter how much he wanted to escape his past, he'd always carry its shadows. Back inside, Donovan turned to Alex, his voice a mixture of resolve and urgency. "We have to find him, Alex. We have to end this." Alex nodded, a fierce determination in his gaze. "We will, Mr. Chase. But this won't be easy. We'll have to be ready for anything." As they stood in the foyer, the weight of the confrontation settled heavily over them. They knew that whatever came next would be the ultimate test, not just of their plan, but of Donovan's will to confront the ghosts of his past and Alex's loyalty in facing an enemy who knew every corner of his employer's darkest secrets. And for the first time, Donovan felt a strange sense of purpose, a drive to not only survive but to make amends, if he survived long enough to do so. The day after Claire's visit, Donovan's mansion was filled with a taut silence, as though everyone in it shared an unspoken understanding that the storm wasn't over. Donovan barely slept, haunted by the memories Claire had stirred up and the unrelenting dread of Liam's vendetta. He replayed her words in his mind, her plea for him to show Liam there was more to life than revenge. But how could he, of all people, try to be a voice of reason? He was still pondering this when he heard footsteps outside his study. Alex entered, his expression grave, holding a thin file. "Mr. Chase," Alex began, his tone cautious, "there's something you need to see." Donovan nodded, gesturing for him to continue, though a chill ran through him at the sight of the file. He'd grown wary of the secrets Alex kept close, but today felt different. He sensed that whatever was in that file would change everything. Alex opened it, pulling out a series of documents and photos. The top one caught Donovan's attention immediately. It was a photo of Isabel, taken years ago, her face bright and full of life. The memory of her hit him like a wave, and he clenched his jaw, trying to keep his emotions in check. He hadn't seen this photo before, nor the handwritten notes that accompanied it. "These were taken from my previous work files," Alex explained, his gaze steady but with an underlying intensity. "Isabel's case, it's one I've been following for years. I knew of her and Liam before I met you, Mr. Chase." Donovan felt his blood run cold. "You were involved in investigating Isabel?" Alex nodded slowly. "Not directly at first, but later, I was assigned to cases involving wealthy figures and their connections to unresolved tragedies. Isabel's death, officially recorded as an accident, never sat right with me. And then I saw how her family crumbled, especially Liam. His resentment grew, and eventually, he joined forces with groups known for targeting people they believed to be responsible for their suffering." Donovan processed this revelation with a mixture of shock and anger. "So you knew all of this and chose to protect me? Why? You clearly believe I had a hand in her suffering." Alex's jaw tightened, and he looked down for a moment before meeting Donovan's gaze. "Because I understand loss, Mr. Chase, and I know that sometimes we make choices out of fear or pressure, choices we regret. I've seen it ruin people from the inside. But there was something different about your case, about her." Donovan's throat felt dry as he realized the implication. "You cared for her, didn't you?" Alex looked away, the first real crack in his composure that Donovan had ever seen. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I met Isabel briefly, years before her life collided with yours. She was remarkable. When I learned what happened to her, I swore I'd find the truth, even if it meant confronting you." The revelation left Donovan stunned. For all his suspicions about Alex, he hadn't imagined this. The man he trusted to protect him had come into his life with the same grief and anger that fueled Liam's vendetta. Yet, unlike Liam, Alex had chosen a different path, one that led him to Donovan's side as an ally rather than an enemy. Donovan took a steadying breath, unable to look away from Alex. "So you took this job to confront me, to judge me?" "I took this job to protect you," Alex replied firmly, regaining his composure. "But also to understand. I needed to know if you were the man I'd imagined, or if you had any humanity left." He looked directly at Donovan, his gaze piercing. "So far, I've seen both sides." Donovan's thoughts churned, the weight of his past decisions pressing down on him. Here was a man who had known Isabel, perhaps even loved her, and had chosen to protect him. The irony stung, but a part of him felt a reluctant respect for Alex's ability to set his emotions aside to carry out his duty. "Do you believe I deserve what Liam's trying to do to me?" Donovan asked, the words barely above a whisper. Alex studied him for a moment before answering. "I believe you deserve the truth, and I believe that everyone deserves a chance to make things right. Liam doesn't see it that way. To him, revenge is the only path forward." A long silence filled the study, the gravity of their shared knowledge and mutual mistrust weighing heavily between them. Donovan's mind reeled, recalling how his decisions had rippled through the lives of others, shaping them in ways he'd never considered. His love for Isabel, his choice to end things for the sake of his family's demands, had shattered more lives than he'd realized. But one question remained unanswered, gnawing at him. "If Liam's intention is to destroy me," he began slowly, "then what was yours?" Alex met his gaze, unwavering. "To protect you," he said. "From him, from yourself. Because revenge is a poison, and I've watched it ruin too many lives. I thought that if I stayed close to you, I could prevent this from ending in tragedy for everyone." Donovan felt a surge of unexpected gratitude. He hadn't thought it possible, but he now understood the depth of Alex's loyalty, a loyalty rooted not just in duty but in empathy, forged from his own suffering. Donovan's walls began to crumble, leaving him with a raw, reluctant respect for the man standing before him. "Thank you, Alex," he said quietly. "I can't pretend to understand it fully, but I'm grateful." Alex nodded, the moment of vulnerability passing as he resumed his stoic demeanor. "Then we need to take action. I've found a way to track Liam's recent movements. He's been laying low, but he left a trail." Donovan straightened, feeling a glimmer of resolve. "Then let's finish this." Later that night, Donovan and Alex drove to a small, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city, a location Alex had uncovered from his contacts. If Liam was hiding somewhere close, this was one of the few spots he could be using. The drive was tense, neither man speaking, both lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, the silence of the area was eerie. Shadows danced across the walls as their flashlights cut through the darkness. Alex led the way, his movements silent and deliberate, his training evident in every step. They reached a door partially ajar, and Alex signaled for Donovan to wait as he stepped inside. Moments later, he gestured for Donovan to follow. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the remnants of long-abandoned furniture strewn about. They navigated the space cautiously, checking each corner, each shadow. Then Donovan saw it, a small, makeshift table with a handful of objects, a notebook, an old framed photo of Isabel, and a series of clippings about his business, his success, his life. Each article was annotated in red ink, the words "justice" and "ruin" scribbled across them in large, angry letters. Alex picked up the notebook, flipping through it before he stopped on a page and handed it to Donovan. It was filled with scrawled, angry messages. He took everything. She loved him, and he destroyed her. He'll know how it feels. Donovan felt a wave of nausea as he read the words, Liam's bitterness pouring from the pages. He understood now just how deeply the hatred ran, and that it wouldn't be sated until Liam had taken his revenge. A part of him wondered if he could blame him. How would he have reacted if someone had taken Isabel from him? As they turned to leave, a sudden noise echoed from outside, a footstep. Both men froze, their gazes meeting in silent understanding. Alex motioned for Donovan to stay behind as he crept toward the door. Moments later, Donovan heard a voice, low, familiar, simmering with barely contained rage. "I knew you'd come eventually, Chase." Donovan stepped forward, his heart pounding as he came face to face with Liam. The man had aged, but his resemblance to Isabel was unmistakable, his piercing eyes now filled with hatred rather than warmth. "Liam," Donovan began, keeping his voice steady, "I don't know what you want, but we don't have to do this." Liam's laugh was hollow, bitter. "Don't we? You stole her from me. You took everything. Now, it's my turn to take something from you." Alex moved between them, his stance protective, his gaze never leaving Liam. "This isn't the way, Liam. Revenge won't bring her back." Liam's face twisted with fury as he glared at Alex. "And what would you know about it? He's just another name on a list for you. But for me, he's the reason I lost my family, my life." Donovan took a shaky breath, stepping closer despite Alex's subtle signal to stay back. "Liam, I'm sorry. I truly am. I made choices back then I wish I hadn't. But what happened to Isabel wasn't. I never wanted her to suffer." Liam's hands clenched at his sides, his face a mask of grief and rage. "Sorry won't fix anything, Chase. You should know that by now." The tension was suffocating, each man waiting for the other to make a move. Donovan could feel his heart pounding, his guilt and fear mixing with a newfound determination. He didn't know if he could change Liam's mind, but he knew he couldn't run from this any longer. "Let me make it right, Liam," Donovan said, his voice almost pleading. "I'll do whatever it takes." Liam's eyes darkened, his face twisting with emotion. "There's only one way to make it right," he hissed, taking a step closer. In that moment, Donovan knew that words would no longer sway him. This was the culmination of years of grief, of betrayal and vengeance simmering until it was all-consuming. And as Liam lunged, Donovan saw Alex's arm move, shielding him, ready to protect him to the very end. The past had caught up, and only one of them would emerge from this final reckoning unscathed. Time seemed to slow as Liam lunged forward, his eyes blazing with decades of pain and resentment. In an instant, Alex moved, stepping between Donovan and Liam, his stance tense and ready to intercept the attack. Liam paused just before reaching them, his gaze darting between Donovan and Alex with a bitter, twisted smile. "So, the loyal protector," he sneered, addressing Alex. "You really think he deserves to be saved, don't you?" Alex's face was a mask of control, his voice calm but firm. "This won't end the way you think, Liam. Whatever happened, taking revenge won't give you peace. It won't bring Isabel back." Liam's eyes hardened, his body rigid with anger. "You think I care about peace? You think I want his forgiveness?" He shot a glare at Donovan, his hands shaking with barely controlled rage. "You destroyed her, Chase. You took everything from her, left her to suffer. She deserved better. I promised myself you would pay, and that's the only thing keeping me going." Donovan felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and fear. He tried to meet Liam's gaze, but the weight of his past made him look away, feeling each of Liam's words pierce like a dagger. "I'm sorry," Donovan said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "I know those words mean nothing to you now, but I need you to know. I never meant to hurt her. I never meant for any of this to happen." Liam's laugh was sharp, tinged with bitterness. "Sorry? You're sorry?" He stepped closer, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and sorrow. "You left her. Left her to deal with the fallout alone. You went off to build your empire while she withered away, forgotten, abandoned. And now you want me to believe you care?" Donovan's throat tightened, his shame heavy. "I made mistakes, Liam. I thought that by leaving, she'd move on, find a better life without the complications I brought." "Complications," Liam repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you called it? You were her world, and you destroyed it." Alex took a step forward, raising a hand, his tone placating. "Liam, please. There's still a way out of this. You've held on to this hatred for so long, but it doesn't have to control you anymore. You can walk away from it." But Liam's face twisted with pain, his eyes wild with grief. "Walk away," he hissed. "You don't know what it's like to watch your sister suffer, to see her light fade because someone decided she was just expendable." His voice broke, the anger giving way to raw sorrow. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Donovan could feel the depth of Liam's suffering, and in that moment, he understood how deeply his actions had affected not just Isabel, but everyone around her. "Liam," Donovan began softly, his voice shaking, "I can't undo what I've done. I can't erase the pain I caused. But I want to help you, if you'll let me." Liam shook his head, his expression resolute. "There's only one thing you can do, Chase." He reached into his coat, pulling out a small black handgun, his hand steady as he aimed it directly at Donovan. Alex's body tensed, but he held his ground, his eyes locked on Liam. "Don't do this," Alex warned, his voice low and urgent. "There are other ways to find justice." Liam's hand shook for a moment, but he quickly steadied it, his gaze fixed on Donovan. "You can't buy your way out of this one, Chase," he spat. "No amount of money, no apology, will change what you did." Donovan felt a strange calm wash over him as he looked into Liam's eyes, seeing a mirror of his own regrets reflected back at him. He realized there was nothing he could say to ease the pain he'd caused, nothing that could absolve him of his guilt. But he wasn't willing to let this end in blood. "Then take your revenge," Donovan said quietly, taking a small step forward, ignoring Alex's sharp intake of breath beside him. "If that's the only way you'll find peace, then do it. But know that if you pull that trigger, it won't bring her back. It'll only take you further from her memory." For a moment, Liam's mask of anger cracked, his eyes glistening with tears. His hand trembled as he gripped the gun tighter, his resolve wavering. Donovan could see the battle within him, the years of pain and resentment colliding with the reality of the choice he was about to make. "Don't give him that power, Liam," Alex interjected softly, his voice almost pleading. "Isabel loved you. She wouldn't want this for you." Liam's face contorted in anguish, and he staggered back, his grip on the gun loosening. His breathing was ragged as he fought against the rage he'd held onto for so long, the hate that had sustained him through years of loss. "You don't know what she'd want," Liam choked, his voice breaking. "You don't know what it was like to lose her, to be left with nothing." Alex's face softened, a hint of empathy in his gaze. "You're wrong, Liam. I know what it's like to lose someone you love, to want revenge so badly it consumes you. But I also know it only leaves you emptier." Liam's arm dropped to his side, the gun slipping from his grasp and clattering to the floor. He looked up at Donovan, his face a mixture of despair and exhaustion. "She was all I had, Chase, and you took her away." The words struck Donovan harder than any physical blow. He stepped forward cautiously, his own voice unsteady. "I can't bring her back, Liam, but maybe we can find a way to honor her memory, to make sure she's never forgotten." Liam looked at him, his expression softened, his anger drained. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Donovan searched for words, realizing he was stepping into uncharted territory. "By doing something meaningful. We could establish a foundation in her name, fund projects that support causes she cared about. A way to keep her spirit alive, to turn her memory into something lasting." Liam stared at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. The fury that had fueled him for years seemed to dim, leaving him looking suddenly vulnerable, lost. Alex moved closer, his voice gentle. "Liam, Isabel would want you to live. She wouldn't want her memory tainted by vengeance. Let this be the end of it." Liam's shoulders sagged, the fight in him finally giving way. He closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his cheek. "I loved her, you know," he murmured, almost to himself. "She was my whole world." Donovan felt his own eyes sting, the weight of his choices settling on him in a way he hadn't experienced before. "I know, Liam, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you both." Liam gave a slight nod, his hand reaching up to wipe away the tear. When he finally opened his eyes, the rage was gone, replaced by a hollow sadness. "Do what you have to," he said, his voice resigned. "Just don't forget her. Don't let her be another ghost." Donovan nodded, feeling a profound sense of responsibility. "I won't. I promise you that." The silence that followed was heavy, the tension finally dissipating as Liam turned and walked away, leaving Donovan and Alex alone in the empty building. They watched him go, the weight of the encounter settling over them both. When Liam was out of sight, Donovan turned to Alex, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "Thank you," Donovan said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything. I don't think I could have faced him without you." Alex gave a small nod, his gaze steady. "It's not over yet, Mr. Chase. You have a promise to keep. Isabel's memory deserves more than words." Donovan took a deep breath, realizing that Alex was right. The encounter with Liam was only the beginning of his reckoning. The foundation he'd promised was a small start, a way to begin making amends. But he knew there was more he could do, more he needed to do, to truly honor Isabel's memory. In the days that followed, Donovan threw himself into planning the foundation, determined to create something worthy of Isabel's legacy. It became his mission, a project that allowed him to channel his guilt and regret into something meaningful. As he worked, Alex remained by his side, ever vigilant, though their relationship had shifted in ways both unspoken and profound. Donovan no longer saw Alex as merely a bodyguard but as a confidant, a man who had walked through the fire of his past with him and helped him emerge, if not unscathed, then at least with a chance at redemption. And while the scars of his choices would always remain, Donovan felt a small flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could rebuild his life, not to escape his past, but to honor it. Donovan's life began to take on a different rhythm in the weeks that followed his confrontation with Liam. He poured himself into establishing the foundation in Isabel's name, finding solace in transforming his guilt into something positive. The foundation's mission was clear: to support causes Isabel had cared about, community development, education, and mental health services. It felt strange to be putting his energy into something other than his empire, but it was the only thing that made sense to him anymore. Alex, as always, remained by his side, his presence now less guarded, the invisible barrier between them gradually dissolving. For the first time in years, Donovan felt as though he was working with someone rather than keeping them at arm's length. Alex had gone from a hired protector to a genuine ally, and Donovan often found himself confiding in him as the plans for the foundation progressed. One afternoon, they were in Donovan's study, discussing the next steps for the foundation's launch, when Alex set his notes down, his expression contemplative. "You're doing the right thing, Mr. Chase," he said, his voice low but sincere. "This foundation, it's a good start." Donovan glanced up, meeting Alex's steady gaze. He'd long grown used to the intensity in Alex's eyes, but today, it held something different, an approval that he hadn't realized he'd been seeking. "Thank you, Alex," he replied, nodding, "for helping me reach this point. None of this would have happened without you." Alex's mouth curved into a rare, small smile. "You did this yourself, sir. I just nudged you in the right direction." Donovan chuckled, though he knew that Alex had done far more than nudge him. He'd been the anchor Donovan hadn't known he needed, the bridge between his past mistakes and his future ambitions. Yet, even with this newfound purpose, there was a nagging feeling at the back of his mind, a sense that he hadn't yet confronted everything that haunted him. As if reading his thoughts, Alex leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "There's something else, isn't there?" Donovan hesitated, feeling the weight of the secrets he'd tried so hard to bury. "Yes," he admitted, sighing. "I can't stop thinking about Isabel. This foundation, it helps, but there's more I should have done, Alex. Things I kept hidden, even from myself. I feel like I owe her one last goodbye." Alex studied him quietly, then nodded. Sometimes facing the past is the only way to finally let it go. Donovan took a deep breath, feeling the truth of Alex's words. "Then let's go," he said, surprising himself. "Let's go back to where it all started." The following day, Donovan and Alex drove to the small coastal town where he'd first met Isabel, where his life had intertwined with hers in ways he'd never forget. The town had changed little since those days, still modest and quiet, the streets lined with family-owned shops and homes with weathered paint and gardens bursting with flowers. They parked near an overlook where the ocean stretched out to the horizon, a place Donovan and Isabel had often visited, sharing dreams and hopes under the open sky. The salty breeze brought with it a flood of memories, both painful and beautiful. Alex waited a few paces behind as Donovan walked to the edge of the overlook, staring out at the waves that had witnessed the beginnings of his love and the painful end of it. He could almost feel Isabel beside him, her laughter in the wind, her voice a soft echo in his mind. After a long silence, he spoke, as if she were still there. "Isabel, I know it's too late to make up for what I did. I should have stood by you, should have been the man you deserved. I thought leaving you was for the best, but I was wrong. I see that now." The words felt as though they'd been buried deep inside him, only now surfacing with the weight of years. He thought of Liam, the bitterness that had twisted his life, and understood how his own decisions had shaped not only his future but the futures of everyone Isabel had loved. "Whatever peace I find now, whatever I build in your name, it's because of you," he continued softly. "I owe you my life, and I promise I won't waste it again." He stood there for several minutes, letting the weight of his confession settle in, feeling the catharsis of finally releasing years of pent-up guilt. When he turned, he found Alex watching him, a look of understanding in his eyes. They drove back to the mansion in silence, Donovan feeling as though a part of himself had finally been laid to rest on that overlook. But the sense of peace was fleeting. The foundation launch was approaching, and he knew he'd have to face more than just his own ghosts if he wanted to make a real impact. 2 weeks later, the day of the foundation's launch arrived. Donovan had planned the event with a quiet dignity, inviting only a small group of close friends, family, and associates. As guests filtered in, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. But as he moved through the crowd, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Midway through the event, as he stepped outside for a moment to gather his thoughts, he noticed a figure standing near the garden. A woman, familiar yet haunting. She turned to look at him, and he felt his heart drop. It was Claire, Liam's sister. She walked toward him, her expression guarded, but as she drew closer, Donovan noticed a sadness that seemed to soften her features. I came because I wanted to see if you'd really done it, she said quietly, her gaze sweeping over the guests and the banners bearing Isabel's name. Donovan nodded, unsure of what to say. He hadn't expected to see her again, not after their last encounter. Thank you for coming, Claire. It means more than you know. She looked away, her shoulders tense. I didn't come here for you, Mr. Chase. I came because of Isabel. Because I needed to know if you were truly honoring her, or if this was just another part of your empire. The words stung, but Donovan took them in stride. He understood why she doubted him, and he knew it was up to him to prove that his intentions were genuine. This foundation is for her, he said firmly. It's for everything she stood for, everything I failed to protect. I know it can't change what happened, but it's my way of making things right. Claire studied him for a long moment, her eyes softening slightly. I never thought I'd see you try to make amends, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam, he can't understand that yet. Maybe he never will. Donovan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He knew that forgiveness from Liam might never come, that some wounds ran too deep to be healed by time alone. But the foundation was more than just a gesture. It was his commitment to honoring Isabel's memory, to ensuring her legacy lived on. As the evening wore on, he felt a sense of closure begin to take root. For the first time in years, he felt as though he'd taken a real step toward redemption, even if it was just a small one. Yet, as he looked around, he couldn't shake the lingering sense of unfinished business. The night was nearly over when Alex approached him, his expression as inscrutable as ever. There's someone here to see you, Mr. Chase, he said quietly. I didn't want to interrupt the event, but it's urgent. Donovan felt a chill sweep over him. He hadn't anticipated any surprises tonight, not after everything he'd gone through to make this day a tribute to Isabel. He followed Alex through the mansion's side entrance, his heart pounding with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. When they reached the side of the garden, he saw a man waiting in the shadows, his back to them. The man turned slowly, and Donovan's breath caught in his throat. It was Liam. He looked older, wearier, but there was a calmness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. His posture was relaxed, his face devoid of the fury that had fueled him during their last encounter. Liam, Donovan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think I'd see you again. Liam nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. I came because I needed to see this for myself. Claire told me what you'd done. The foundation. The promises you've made in Isabel's name. Donovan swallowed, feeling the gravity of the moment settle over him. It's real, Liam. Everything I've done since we last spoke, it's to honor her, to make sure her memory lives on. Liam's eyes searched his face, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he gave a small nod. Maybe this won't fix everything. Maybe it's not enough. But it's a start. For the first time, Donovan saw a glimmer of something other than hatred in Liam's eyes, a flicker of acceptance, perhaps even respect. It was tentative, fragile, but it was there. As Liam turned to leave, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. Take care of her memory, Donovan. Make sure you don't forget her. I won't, Donovan replied, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. I'll make sure she's remembered every day. And with that, Liam walked away, disappearing into the night, leaving Donovan with a sense of peace he hadn't thought possible. He glanced at Alex, who gave a slight nod, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Donovan realized then that he'd finally laid his past to rest, and with it, the ghosts that had haunted him for so long. Isabel's legacy would live on, and as Donovan looked up at the stars, he felt a quiet assurance that perhaps, somewhere, she was at peace too. In the weeks following the Foundation's launch and Liam's visit, Donovan felt as though he were navigating a new life. For the first time, the weight of his guilt had eased, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. Isabel's foundation was thriving, her name now synonymous with causes she would have fought for. Each day, as Donovan reviewed project reports and new initiatives, he felt he was honoring her memory in a way he never could have before. But moving forward wasn't without complications. Donovan's company, Chase Enterprises, had been his life's work, yet he now found himself torn between his business empire and the foundation. He hadn't anticipated how deeply the foundation would resonate with him, nor the urge to spend more of his time there. And as he spent more time away from his company, cracks in the corporate world he'd ruled for years began to show. One afternoon, Donovan sat with Alex in the foundation's offices, a small, sunlit space filled with warmth and life, something he'd never felt in his company's sleek, sterile boardrooms. Alex had become not just a protector but a confidant, a rare presence who could balance both roles seamlessly. "Alex," Donovan said, glancing up from a proposal, "do you think it's foolish to pull back from the company? To let the board handle things while I focus on this?" Alex met his gaze with a calm, steady look. "I don't think it's foolish, sir, but it's a major shift. Chase Enterprises has been the center of your life for decades. Transitioning will take adjustment on your part and on the part of everyone who looks to you for leadership." Donovan nodded thoughtfully, feeling the weight of the decision. He'd built the company from the ground up, but now it felt almost foreign to him, like a shell of a life he no longer wanted. What he wanted was here, in the foundation, where every action felt meaningful. "Maybe it's time to pass the reins to someone else," he said, surprising even himself with the suggestion. "I've done enough to secure the company's future. Maybe it's time for new leadership, a new direction." Alex's expression softened, a rare flicker of approval in his eyes. "It's not an easy choice, but I think Isabel would have been proud. You're putting people before power, something not many men are willing to do." The sincerity in Alex's words struck Donovan, reinforcing his conviction. He'd long used power as a means of control, a shield to keep others at bay. But now, the foundation had given him a different kind of strength, one rooted in compassion and responsibility. His mind made up, he scheduled an emergency board meeting. The decision to step back and appoint a successor was met with both shock and resistance, but Donovan stood firm, assuring the board that he would remain as an advisor while the company transitioned to new leadership. With the company in new hands, Donovan threw himself fully into the foundation. He and Alex worked side by side to ensure that Isabel's vision was realized. Together, they expanded the foundation's reach, funding programs for education and mental health support in underserved communities, causes that had meant the world to Isabel. As they began partnering with local charities, Donovan's face appeared on news channels and in newspapers not as the ruthless CEO but as a philanthropist dedicated to giving back. For the first time, he felt his public image aligned with his personal mission, and it was a revelation. But his transformation wasn't just personal. The foundation's success caught the attention of a few major donors, individuals who wanted to support a cause with such a passionate and personal leader at its helm. The momentum grew quickly, and soon the foundation was gaining the same level of influence Chase Enterprises once held, albeit in a different, more meaningful way. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Donovan sat with Alex in the foundation's conference room, both of them exhausted but content. They reviewed the upcoming projects, the possibilities expanding with each new partnership. "You've come a long way," Alex said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Most people wouldn't have made it this far. They would have tried to sweep their past under the rug and move on. But you've faced it, changed because of it. That's rare." Donovan looked at Alex, gratitude filling him. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me the courage to confront things I'd hidden from for too long. You didn't just protect me, you guided me." Alex's mouth quirked into a small smile, but his gaze remained serious. "Sometimes, people just need someone who believes in them. Isabel saw that in you, even if you couldn't see it in yourself. I was just reminding you of what she already knew." Donovan looked away, a bittersweet ache filling his chest. Isabel had seen his potential, even during his darkest moments, and now he was finally living up to her vision. She may have been gone, but her influence would endure through the foundation and in the man he had become. Just as Donovan felt he was truly embracing his new purpose, an unexpected message arrived. His assistant handed him an envelope, saying only that it had been left at the front desk. The envelope was simple, unmarked, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Claire. He opened it, his pulse quickening as he read her short, heartfelt message. "Thank you for honoring her memory. for doing what others wouldn't. You've given my brother and me a kind of peace I never thought possible. We may never truly forgive, but we'll never forget what you've done." The note was bittersweet, yet it offered a sense of closure. Liam's fury had driven him to the edge, but Donovan's actions had shown both him and Claire that Isabel's memory was respected, her legacy a permanent part of their lives. He hoped that, in time, the bitterness would give way to acceptance. He folded the note, tucking it carefully into his wallet, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. In a way, this was the last loose end of his past being tied, a quiet but powerful acknowledgement from the family he'd once hurt. Months passed, and the foundation continued to grow. Donovan and Alex expanded their reach across the country, each new partnership deepening Donovan's sense of purpose. With the successes came a quiet joy, a feeling that for once, his life was aligned with something pure and meaningful. One evening, Donovan and Alex attended a gala in honor of the foundation's achievements. The atmosphere was celebratory, and the ballroom was filled with people who had supported Donovan's mission from the beginning. As Donovan delivered his speech, he saw Alex standing at the edge of the crowd, his arms crossed, his face reflecting pride. After the speech, Alex approached Donovan, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Donovan, clinking it against his. "You did it, Mr. Chase. You turned something painful into something extraordinary." Donovan raised his glass, smiling. "I had help." He paused, studying Alex's face. "This isn't just my foundation, Alex. It's ours. You've done as much to make this happen as I have." Alex shook his head modestly, but there was warmth in his eyes. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," Donovan replied, a faint smile crossing his lips. "You were doing more than that. You were a friend, the only friend who truly believed in me." The moment lingered between them, the gratitude unspoken but deeply felt. They stood side by side, watching as the guests celebrated, their shared journey etched into every part of the foundation's success. In the months that followed, Donovan finally found a sense of peace, his life now dedicated to Isabel's legacy and the betterment of others. The once overbearing weight of guilt and regret had transformed into a source of strength, a drive to create change that would outlast him. He had rebuilt his future, but this time, it was a future he could be proud of, a life that honored those he had lost. And through it all, Alex remained by his side, not just as his bodyguard, but as the person who had helped him see the possibility of redemption. Together, they continued to build, heal, and honor a memory that had once been a source of pain but had now become a beacon of hope. As Donovan looked at the world he had created, he knew Isabel's spirit was with him, guiding him, reminding him that it was never too late to change, to make amends, and to rebuild a future filled with purpose. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel pride, not in his power or wealth, but in his ability to change, to honor, and to live with a heart unburdened by regret. A year passed, and the Isabel Chase Foundation grew from a modest tribute to a thriving organization that touched countless lives. Donovan had found peace, but more than that, he'd found purpose. The foundation now supported educational programs, mental health initiatives, and community projects nationwide. What he'd once viewed as a mere gesture of penance had become a genuine legacy, transforming not only him but everyone around him. On the foundation's first anniversary, Donovan organized a charity event at the mansion. The guests included foundation donors, community leaders, and several of the beneficiaries whose lives had been changed by Isabel's legacy. As the night unfolded, Donovan looked around, seeing the room filled with laughter, hope, and the spirit of the woman who had inspired it all. Yet amid the success, a quiet awareness lingered. This journey was as much a personal transformation as it was a public endeavor. Donovan was no longer the man who had buried his past in an empire built on ruthless ambition. He was no longer haunted by memories he tried to leave behind. Instead, he had embraced them, made peace with them, and allowed them to shape his future. As the event progressed, Donovan felt a familiar presence beside him. Alex, his unwavering protector and friend, stood with his usual calm, though his expression held something new, a warmth that Donovan had rarely seen. "This is a long way from the life you knew," Alex remarked. his voice carrying a note of admiration. Donovan smiled, nodding. It is. But it's the life I never knew I wanted. Isabel? She changed everything, even if it took me far too long to realize it. They stood in silence, watching the guests mingle, each person a testament to the Foundation's work. Donovan felt a deep, unspoken gratitude for Alex, whose loyalty and compassion had been the steady force guiding him through his transformation. I never thanked you properly, Donovan said, breaking the silence. For everything you did, for staying by my side, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. This wouldn't have happened without you. Alex's expression softened, and he gave a slight nod. I've always believed that people can change if they truly want to. You just needed a reason to see it. He glanced out over the crowd, his voice thoughtful. In a way, this was meant to be. Maybe Isabel's memory was meant to guide you to this life. Donovan was silent, the weight of Alex's words settling over him. Isabel had indeed been the catalyst for his transformation, her memory the foundation of his redemption. But he had come to realize that the work was only just beginning. As the evening drew to a close, Donovan took the stage, a microphone in hand. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to him. For a moment, he hesitated, feeling the enormity of the journey that had brought him here. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This foundation was born out of regret, of a need to make amends for mistakes I can never undo. But it has become something far more than that. It has become a way to honor the memory of someone who believed in hope, in kindness, in second chances. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. Tonight, I want to acknowledge that this journey wasn't mine alone. I had help from the people who stood by me and from those who pushed me to be better. And most of all, I want to thank each of you for believing in the work we're doing here, for helping us build a future that honors Isabel's spirit. A wave of applause swept through the room, and Donovan stepped back, overwhelmed by the support and encouragement surrounding him. As he made his way down from the stage, several guests approached him, sharing stories of how the foundation had impacted their lives, each tale deepening his sense of purpose. Then, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. Donovan. He turned, his breath catching. Claire stood before him, her expression softer, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and sadness. They hadn't seen each other since the Foundation's launch, and her presence here felt like a full-circle moment, as if the final piece of his journey had fallen into place. Claire, he greeted her, his voice gentle. I'm glad you came. She offered a tentative smile, her gaze searching his face. I wasn't sure I would, but I had to see for myself what you've done in Isabel's name. I didn't want her memory to fade into something you felt obligated to maintain. I wanted it to be real. It is real, Donovan replied, his voice filled with conviction. Everything we've done, every person we've helped, it's all because of her. Isabel's spirit is here, in every project, every success. She's part of everything. Claire's face softened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then I think she'd be proud. You've kept your promise, Donovan. They stood in silence, a sense of understanding passing between them, one forged by a shared grief and a shared hope for the future. Donovan felt as though he had finally come to terms with the past and that Isabel's memory would now forever be a part of his life, guiding him toward the man he wanted to be. As Claire walked away, Donovan felt a lightness in his heart, a sense that the final ties to his past had been peacefully laid to rest. In the days following the event, Donovan fully immersed himself in the Foundation's work, expanding its reach and deepening its impact. Alex continued to stand by him, not just as a protector but as a trusted partner in the Foundation's mission. Together, they brought Isabel's legacy to life, pushing the Foundation into new territories and tackling projects that had once seemed impossible. Donovan's life had become one of meaning and purpose, his days filled with the joy of giving back rather than the pursuit of power. And with every life the Foundation touched, he felt Isabel's presence, as if she were watching over him, reminding him of the importance of love, compassion, and redemption. As the Foundation grew, so did Donovan's understanding of the life he wanted to live. He had left behind the ruthless, solitary world of corporate conquest, finding a deeper satisfaction in the simple, profound act of giving. He was no longer the man haunted by mistakes, but a man transformed by them, a man determined to make a difference. Years later, Donovan stood once more at the overlook where he'd first met Isabel, the same spot where he had spoken to her memory after his reconciliation with Liam. This time, he felt a peace he hadn't known before, a quiet assurance that he had done right by her family, and by himself. As he looked out at the waves, he felt a presence beside him, a warmth that was both familiar and comforting. He closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment to imagine Isabel's voice, her laughter, the light she had brought into his life. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carrying into the breeze. "For everything." He felt the breeze shift, as if in answer, and he opened his eyes, a smile tugging at his lips. He knew she was at peace, and finally, so was he. With one last look at the ocean, Donovan turned back, ready to continue his journey, not as a man ruled by his past, but as one who had embraced it, transformed by love, loss, and the quiet redemption that had given his life true meaning. Isabel's memory would remain forever, a guiding star illuminating a path toward a legacy of compassion and hope.